My aunt is demanding that I help my family out by looking after my lazy, no-for-good-nothing brother. Well, I went ahead and agreed with it, and the joke's on me, because everything I thought happened, happened. And guess what? It's even worse than I expected. I grew up in a family of 8, and it's not a surprise because Mexicans are known for giving birth to many children. I'm the 4th among my siblings, and 3 brothers are seniors, and a sister and a brother are juniors. My parents were civil servants and could barely gather enough to feed us, so they pushed us to learn a trade while growing up. My oldest brother went on to work on a farm, while my 2 other brothers got enrolled at an auto repair shop. It didn't take me long to answer when I asked what I'd like to learn, and my answer was simple, clear, and affirmative. I told my parents I wanted to learn catering. As expected, they weren't so surprised with my answer, probably because they would have been surprised if I've mentioned something else. The reason is not far-fetched. Everyone in my family knew how much I loved cooking and eating nice food. Even though we had not had enough money to buy varieties of ingredients, I was always creative with making sumptuous meals from the cheap ingredients we could afford. We lived in a suburb close to Rio Grande River, so my mom had a shop where she sold seafood and a side source of income. Growing up wasn't so easy that, as a child, I had to compete with my siblings to survive and not be left behind. Even as a girl amongst strong-boned boys, I learned how to stand up to them and not give them any reason to cheat me by whatsoever means possible. There were times when some of us had to go live with our grandparents, including me. I stayed with Grandma a year after Grandpa died and lived with her for 5 years, before she had to come live with our parents, and that was when she was entering a relapse due to her old age. Since Grandma was now with us, I was sent off to live with my aunt, who at the time already had 4 children roaming amongst her house. Aunt Lillian was my mom's younger sister, and resembles my mom a lot, except in their methods of disciplining a child. My mom was a bit reserved when it came to punishing or disciplining us, while my dad was an expert at that. Aunt Lillian, on the other hand, is the chief disciplinarian in her nuclear family. While the husband follows after Mom in that regard, I was 15 years old when I moved into my aunt's place. It was at first strange living with my cousins, who I had to learn to get used to, as I did with my siblings at home, and this time around, I couldn't be as free with them as I was with my siblings. There are many siblings who act like snatching away my brother's roasted yam, hiding their clothes, till they forgot about it and start to wear it, claiming it was mine, fighting for who sleeps on the bed, and many more. On many occasions I got away with them, but I did not need a soothsayer before I knew that it was nearly impossible here in my newly found family. My dad brought me to my aunt's place with my luggage roughly packed in a tattered bag, and I was no different from a sent-off housemaid. When we got there, my aunt, who I've not seen in a long time, welcomed us with a big old smile and served me a good hot meal. It did inspire me with false hope that I'd come to live in a palace. I never knew it was no different from a big chicken that's well-fed so it can grow quality meats that will end up in the pot. Update number 1. My dad left for home on the second day. Afterward, my aunt called me and asked me what I'd like to do. I told her I wanted to continue my education in catering lessons. She chuckled and said, "You really like good things. Would it be easy to raise a child and send them to school? Your father would bring you here." "Child, you would have to put a peg on your school for now. However, we can still find a way around your catering lessons," said my aunt calmly. After hearing that, I had mixed feelings in that what was said, "I won't go to school for some time," made me sad. Where I could make friends, yet I was happy I could continue my catering lessons. That was a win for me already, and even as a teenager, I was prepared to give it my best. The following day, my aunt took me to a catering shop, and I became part of 8 trainees. In a matter of months, I've earned my boss's attention, and she would always give me more tasks, and the difficult ones knowing that I had the balls to see them through. At the age of 20, I developed an ambition to become one of the most successful chefs in the city. I was never ready to settle down for a local caterer, but I wanted to be renowned professional in the industry. I knew right away I had to complete my academic cycle since I was already making money as a caterer and saved enough to see me through a 2-year diploma. I went for it and I graduated top of my class, earning me a scholarship to study in a culinary college in the US of A. This experience was the game changer in my life, as I was the first person in my family to travel abroad at all. Take less of studying abroad without paying $1. Well, after 3 long years, I was done with my studies and was called out as the best graduating student on our convocation day. I received a lot of offers from food institutes and top restaurants in the US of A, but I was determined to return home and start a restaurant of my own. Update number 2. I celebrated a year anniversary of my restaurant a week ago, and things were really going great for me and my business, since that was the major thing I invested my life and resources into. I did my little best in making contributes to my immediate family needs and sometimes sent financial help to my aunt as well. However, they still feel I've disappointed them and complain that I don't do much, which is far from being true. There was no way to satisfy them. One day, while I was planning and catering a contract I was awarded by one of the business moguls in town, a call came from my auntie. At first, I wanted to ignore it and call back later so I won't be distracted from the calculations I've already gotten engrossed in. But then I don't want to be disrespectful, so I picked up the call. Was the loud shout I heard, and I had to quickly move the receiver away from my ear to save my eardrum. "Were you reciting the state and capital before you decided to pick up my call?" she asked grumpily. "No, Aunt, I was busy with something and didn't immediately notice your call." "Really?" she replied sarcastically. "And, well, do you think you're all grown up for me to whoop your butt, you ungrateful little jerk?" "Oh, Auntie, what have I done to deserve this derogatory word?" I asked with a surprised tone. "Are you really asking me that? 'Cause I think you deserved more than I just gave you already." Let's just cut to the chase. What do you want from me, Auntie? I'm sure you didn't just call me to remind me of how you can still whoop my butt." I saved some time she was clearly ready to waste. She replied, "Oh, so you want to start acting high and mighty now, bravo." I was mute, didn't say anything, and it did work because it gave her a notion. I'd given up on dragging words with her. At last, she was ready to speak. So she said, "Well, your mama called and told me you've not been returning her calls after she told you about your baby brother that she wants you to take in. Do you remember I mentioned I have 2 younger brothers, 1 boy, 1 girl? Yeah, the boy's name's Jose, and he's the youngest of us all. At the time, Jose was 15, and I was 10 years older than him. But it turned out Jose was a spoiled brat, who had a lot of entitlements because he was the last born. He had participated in house chores and was used to his siblings doing things for him. As fate would have it, all my older siblings have left home and settled down on their own trying to sort life out. So only Jose and his immediate older sister were still at the family home with my parents, but have been having issues with my parents, especially my mother because he was very lacking in helping with the house chores. Moreso, he was a junior in high school at the time, but had been repeating classes that all his mates were already in senior high, and would soon graduate from high school. There's hardly a week that there won't be a noise in the neighborhood about Jose causing one problem or the other. He's been involved in breaking someone's glass window with a baseball, engaged in countless street fights, stealing my parents' money, and the like. He successfully became a nuisance in the community, and the only way to salvage him was to get him out of the community to a place where he could be rehabilitated and trained to become a better person. Earlier, before my aunt called, my mom had called to ask if I could take him in. I told her affirmatively that it was a bad idea, that I rarely have time to attend to some other issues aside from business, which might betray the purpose of Jose coming to stay with me. I guess it was when Mom discovered I would not budge easily that she had to involve my aunt to talk me into taking Jose in. What's up, everybody? Mr. Reddito here. I hope you're having a great day. Update number 3 is kind of a roller coaster ride, so just a little warning there. Maybe grab your favorite beverage, sit down, relax, because update 3 is right here. It occurred to me that it was only a matter of time before I would be tagged as a black sheep in the family because I refused to take custody of my baby brother. That could have been pushed to my older ones, but because it appeared that I was the most successful amongst us, and still unmarried, they saw me fit and put me in the noose of guilt, while the others were breaking loose. To end the gainsayings, I called home and told them they could send Jose over to my place. And to my surprise, he was at my place the second day. It was as if they already packed his bags and were just waiting for my call. Jose was able to locate my house because he's visited with Mom before, but I was at work already and not at home when my housemaid Miriam called me and told me my brother was around. I had to tell her to give him the phone to hear his voice before I believed it, and he was at my place indeed. So I told Miriam to show him to the visitor's room, which would be his new bedroom for as long as he stayed here. As usual, I got back very late from work that day, but my housemaids had already ensured he was fed. As I entered the living room, I saw him watching the TV. He greeted me, and I also gave him a warm welcome. I wanted to talk with him about the purpose of his migration to my place, and what was expected of him to do and not do. However, I was also tired, but I still had to talk to him that same night, knowing that I would not be traveling the next day for a conference in the USA, and would not be back until a week later. It was too late for a dinner, so I just freshened up in my room and returned to the living room, and started to discuss what I expected from him. I talked about repentance from his wayward attitude, and more importantly, an increased commitment to his academics. I emphasized to him that I would not always be around, not to mention pampering him so he had to grow up a little. He assured me he had taken note of everything I said and acted accordingly. He also promised to make me proud. I was glad to hear that from him. After all, I wasn't ready to ration my busy schedule because I wanted to look out for a troublesome brother. I told him to go to bed so we could get ready for tomorrow, then he'll enroll in a new school close by the house. My flight was rescheduled for 9 a.m. the next day, so I had to sort out everything needed for Jose's enrollment that night. I handed everything to Miriam to handle it successfully, since she attended the same school at the time, even though she was already in the final class. I left for the U.S. the second day as scheduled and could not contact home until 2 days after I got to the conference. I was able to chat with Miriam for the update about Jose's school, and she replied all went well, that Jose had settled down in junior high school and gotten all his textbooks and teachers, and the private tutor I hired came around the previous day. I was relieved hearing that, knowing that I did not have to add Jose to my list of worries throughout my stay at the conference. I told Miriam to keep me updated if anything new comes up. On the third day of my arrival in the U.S., my mom's call came in, but I was in a lecture room, so I couldn't really answer it. Concluding I'd call her back after I was done, I knew it wasn't something I could pick up at the moment, because my mom talked at length anytime she called. I don't know if she does that with my other siblings, but anytime she called me, she would gist me about everything going on in the extended family, and even the neighborhood. I remember when she told me that one of my junior high school friends who lived very close to us got pregnant and gave birth. She even told me the name of the baby, as it would have came in handy for me. One news she doesn't forget to break is the news of either my friends or my mates, or family members who had been weddings, emphasizing how glamorous the wedding was, and ending it on the note that she would be looking forward to when I'd have a more glamorous wedding, where she can walk her shoulders high and invite her friends and enemies. In short, Mom did a heck of a job in bringing me up to speed about things happening in the family and neighborhood where I grew up. Well, I can't deny I did not enjoy it as well, even though it ate from some of the time I did not have, but it was obvious to me Mom really enjoyed it. And that alone was enough to get me interested, so I postponed my mom's call to the night after I retired from the day schedule, so I could be at her disposal to listen to all her updates. The day ended later than it was scheduled for, and I was darn tired than cross-border caramel that I forgot I wanted to call Mom. Once I entered my room, I just took a shower and went to bed immediately, instead of waking up early the next day to prepare the next day where I would anchor a presentation. Thanks to my disciplined proudness, I woke up when I intended to, prepared my presentation, and dressed up for the day's meeting. When it was time for the presentation, I was called out and presented with confidence and clarity, as I'd prepared beforehand. People asked different questions, and I answered all of them very, very well. But there was something particular about the guy who asked the last question before we ended the meeting for the day. I knew on the spot he was Mexican from his accent, and he looked sweet, even from the way he presented himself. After the presentation, he met and introduced himself as Mateo, a nutritionalist. He was born and spent the childhood days in Mexico, but now lives in the U.S. for at least a decade. He commended my presentation and commented it was a good one. He asked if we could talk the following day after the conference ends, which I hesitantly obliged. Since there's no way I could travel back the same day to Mexico, I felt it wasn't bad to chill around with a fellow country person. While Mateo was still talking, my phone rang. It was a call from my mother. Immediately, I remembered I owed her a call return, and you can never get away with a call debt with Mom. She would keep calling and calling until you settled said debt. I quickly excused myself from the discussion with Mateo and answered my mom's calls. As I returned to my room in the hotel I'd lodged in. "Hello, my sweet mija. How are you?" asked my mother from the other end of the call. "I'm fine, Mama. I'm sorry. I couldn't recall your call, and I meant to call 2 days ago. It jumped off my mind, I'm sorry. How's Papa? And everyone at home?" "Well, all thanks to God, we're all doing fine. Did you hear that the priest's daughter of the parish we attended was impregnated by his boyfriend? And yet they are unmarried." "Oh, really? That's so bad." I had to act surprised to avoid registering me for an impromptu marriage education that night. "Yes, mija. Well, we saw it coming. The tiny-legged girl had always been promiscuous in her ways, and it was just a matter of time before she got bumped by a guy." It's what everyone in the parish had been talking about, and they're waiting for what Father France would do in this situation his daughter has brought him to. Well, I feel for Father. I'm sure God would take control. I had to involve God to maintain a pious attitude towards Mom, because I knew that was exactly what she wanted. She'd always wanted to feel her children are better than everyone else so that she can always talk about them amongst her friends and receive high praise for being such a good mother. It was clear. That was part of what sponsored her insistent request to cart off Jose out of the community, since he was already damaging their reputation she was so nurturing. I was feeling sleepy already while on the call, but still, I knew I needed to stay through till Mom was satisfied with the phone call. To stylishly cut short Mom's long list of updates while she was talking, I immediately asked if she'd spoken to Jose since he came to my place. And it worked. I was sure Jose's topic was part of why my mom called me. She was just not there yet. So I had to fast-track her pace, and she said, "Yes, my daughter. I've heard from the big guy yesterday. He called me on the phone you gave him, and he told me all's well with school. Thank you, baby, for taking care of your brother. It really means a lot to us. God will keep blessing and expanding your business." "Amen," I replied with enthusiasm, knowing that the prayers were indicators that we were nearing the end of the discussion. Alrighty, well, I was partially right because we still spent about 6 minutes on the said prayer before she finally asked me when I would be back in Mexico and finally hung up. I saw a text from Mateo reminding him about our informal date, and I replied to him, "Okay." It sounded cold to me, so I added I look forward to it. The next day, we ended the conference with a lunch party, and some who had already booked flights left for their destination immediately. I just retired to my room and called my assistant in my restaurant in Mexico to give me a detailed report since I've left. I spent about 2 hours doing that because I had to analyze the reports and gave directives about some that needed immediate attention. I had no plans of ending the call when I did. If not because of the reminder I set for my meeting with Mateo, I made a rough conclusion with my representation and told her to get things ready for my arrival. To avoid being late, since I'm consensuous with the time, whether formal or informal engagements, I quickly freshened up, dressed, and set out to the agreed location. It was a beautiful park we met. We talked and shared information about family and work histories. The discussion made us realize that we had so much in common. Our meeting was short-lived by the rain, But before we left our separate ways, Mateo told me he had a plan to relocate back to Mexico and set up a diet and nutrition consultation center. He added he always had the vision to start a foundation that addresses the country's malnourishment challenges, especially in the rural areas. He proposed that it was something I could work on him with, since I lived in Mexico more than he did, and I'm also experienced in the food industry of Mexico. I told him I'd think about it and give him my feedback. He noticed that nothing more would make him happier if I agreed to partner with him, and that he had a good feeling our partnership would bring about great exploits. It was night already when I got back to my motel room. I packed my luggage in preparation for my 7 a.m. flight and decided to sleep early. It was already the next day, and I've just boarded the plane and was about to settle down to sit, when a call came in. It was from Mary Ann. I couldn't answer immediately, hoping it wouldn't be very important, thinking probably she just wanted to check on me. More so, since the flight from US to Mexico was roughly 2 hours and 40 minutes long. I thought whatever the reason behind her call should be able to survive that long before I got home. A few minutes into our flight, her call came in again. I ignored it, only to find out she had left 4 missed calls already. What's going on? I thought loudly. At the same moment, her call came again. You gotta have a good reason for this call, I muttered to myself. I looked stylishly to the front and back to confirm it was no flight attendants on watch, and there were none, so I picked up the call. The first thing I heard was a cry. Mary Ann was crying. Before I had the opportunity to ask why she was crying, a flight attendant appeared at my flank and said, "Ma'am, you're not allowed to call during the flight. Kindly put your phone on flight mode, thank you." There was no way I could be calm after hearing the 5-second call I had with Mary Ann. I began to wish our plane would arrive in Mexico immediately. What has happened? That was the question streaming through my mind during the whole flight. Update number 5, final update. We got to Mexico Airport at the scheduled time, and my assistant was already waiting for me with my car. Against my initial plan, I drove straight to my apartment. On my way, I tried Miriam's number to have the story behind the cry I heard on our last call, but she wasn't reachable. I became more anxious and uncollected. I'm not sure if I was actually the one who even drove myself home that day. As I got home, I saw a few counts of people gathered in my compound. Most of them neighbors, and I saw firefighters getting ready to leave. Mary Ann spotted my car as I drove into the compound and rushed to me crying. "What happened?" I asked. "Fire. The store," was all she could say, and I got the message right away. I became more disturbed, and I ran straight to one of the firefighters about what happened. As they were telling me the story where I kept some of the products I use for my business caught fire, and from the investigation they found out Jose, in an attempt to hide, went to the store to drink alcohol and smoke. While he was drinking, he passed out and dropped an unquenched cigarette on one of the sacks containing raw food products, which caught ablaze. It was the heat that woke him up and made him run out just to save himself. He tried quenching the fire himself, but when it was obvious it's beyond his power, he called out for Mary Ann, who immediately dialed the firefighter emergency number, and they came right away. I was told to be grateful that the fire did not spread to other places in the home, but only did damage to the store. I was absolutely broken. I almost lost my house, people almost died, and lost goods worth hundreds of thousands of pesos. "Where is that crazy boy?" I shouted. I spotted him in a corner looking like a Christmas fowl. I went straight to him, and I slapped him, dragged him to my car, and drove straight to my aunt's place. I could only cuss at him while driving at my aunt's place. "I thought you had turned a new leaf, but I didn't know how your ambition wants to ruin my life, and I won't allow you to achieve that. You think you have a right to destroy me because you're my brother? No, nobody has the right. I tried to help you, but you've proved to me you're past helping." I got to my aunt's place in record time, and she wasn't around. Still, I told Jose to get out of my car, sit in front of her stairs, and wait till she came. "Since she started the crusade to bring you over here, let her bear the responsibilities too," I said. I drove away without even looking back. I just entered my room when my aunt called me in. But I was dropping them off and put her on voicemail. I wasn't ready to talk with her at all. Before the next morning, she left about 20 voicemails asking me to see her and settle things so I could take Jose back. I didn't budge. Rather, I was focused on repairing my burnt shop and recovering from my loss. My aunt came to my house but didn't meet me at home. My housemaid called me and told me she had to come to the house. I knew that my restaurant was the next place she would check. So I left the restaurant immediately and instructed my employees to tell her I traveled when she asked of me, which they did. But my aunt, who knew me already, did not believe a word that they said. And she was fed up already by the cat and mouse game that I was playing and reported me to my parents. My mother joined in too, in the call hunt, including my older ones, but I acted the role of smart prey who avoided being caught by the hunter. My mind was already up about Jose, and I would not have anything to do with him again. Let my aunt take him in if she actually cares for him, considering her devotion to ensure Jose left our parents to stay with me. But let me ask you guys this. What would you do? Am I the a-hole for dropping off Jose back at his aunt's place? Okay, so this story was so insane. I basically just have one question for you guys. If you were in OP's position and you were going to look after your brother, who you knew was a nightmare, and then this event unfolds and you have to deal with the aftermath, almost losing your dream restaurant, being out hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of goods and items, all because he decided to be lazy and go and smoke and drink in your place of business and burn it to a crisp. So how would you handle that situation? Would you get him in the car, instantly slap him across the face and take him back to the aunt? Or could you have it inside yourself to somehow forgive him and try to get him on a better path? I would love to know your thoughts on this story, guys. Go ahead and drop your thoughts in the comment section. If you're new to the channel, hello, thanks for joining us. My name's Mr. Reddito. I read stories every single day, so you can find me here or on one of my other channels, which you can find in the description below. Thank you so much once again. I hope you guys have a great day. Let's talk in the comment section, and I'll see you in the next one.